Dear viewers, welcome back. Another week, another episode of Governance This Week. And most of you will have seen the iconic picture of the protester on the streets of Tbilisi waving the EU flag while facing a water cannon. Today we talk about Georgia and how the country seems to be caught between the European Union and Russia. And my guest today is Teona Giuashvili. She's worked as a diplomat for Georgia in various postings in Europe, and she's currently a fellow at our School of Transnational Governance. Teona, I'm very happy to have you here today.
Thank you very much, Roland. Thank you very much also for your interest in Georgia. So, as you have rightly mentioned, Georgia made international headlines last week, and thousands have taken to the street to protest the decision by the Georgian parliament, by the ruling party, to adopt a law on transparency of foreign influence in the first reading. And the government explained that the law was necessary for transparency. However, it envisaged the introduction of the definition of an agent of foreign influence, and the law would label as foreign agents all non-profit organizations that receive at least 20% of their funding from abroad. So the law raised a number of concerns. First of all, it risked undermining and having negative consequences on Georgia's democratic space because it would certainly hinder the work that civil society organizations are conducting in Georgia. It would harm media freedom, as well as certainly intimidate and erode the power of civil society. And it was at odds with all the efforts that the European Union and other partner organizations are investing to support the development of open civil society in Georgia. So the bottom line is that the law was reminiscent of the 2012 Russian law on foreign agents, which for the Kremlin became an instrument of repression of civil society, media, or human rights organizations. In addition to this, the law was incompatible with European values, standards, and legal practices. So it risked undermining the prospects of Georgia's integration with the European Union. And the European Union, its member states, other partner countries and organizations have been very clear about the repercussions that it would have had on Georgia's partnership with them. So as a result, following massive peaceful protests, the Georgian people compelled the government to repeal the law.
Hmm. So that's a great introduction to what we have seen happening in Georgia, Teona. But where does that leave the country now, to start with, in the relationship with the European Union?
Um, this is an important question because the context in which this law was adopted raised questions about the commitment of Georgian government to Georgia's European integration. And here I would like to make 2 points. First of all, when we're speaking about European choice of Georgia, it's not a top-down project. It's not a project driven or imposed by the ruling party, by political elite. So neither the ruling party nor the opposition parties have ownership of it. So this is a choice that has deep roots in Georgia's history and culture and became a part of Georgia's identity. So this is a way of life that Georgians are striving to embrace, and this is the rights, freedoms, and the opportunities that they would like to enjoy. And this is a choice that is supported by more than 80% of the Georgian population. And the second point is about Georgia's long road towards European Union. So the partnership started 20 years ago under the neighborhood policy. In 2014, Georgia, together with Moldova and Ukraine, signed the association agreements with the European Union, including a deep and comprehensive free trade areas. And so with this, they have opened a new chapter, new phase of political association and economic integration with the European Union. So these three countries were making their steps on the European path. It was Russia's aggression against Ukraine that has been a watershed moment, that has created new geopolitical reality in Europe and has led the European Union and its member states to shift their approach toward the Eastern Partnership. Following the formal request from Ukraine, Moldova, and Georgia, the European Council in June 22 broke with years of stalemate and granted the status of candidate country to Ukraine and Moldova. In the case of Georgia, the European Council recognized European perspective of Georgia, but made the status conditional on progress on the 12 priorities that are listed by the European Commission. So the European Union will consider progress or lack of it in the fall at the end of this year. And certainly this decision has undermined and made it difficult for the European Union to grant candidate status and undermined this path. That's why it was important as well.
And do you think that the recent developments and also the the peaceful protests the massive peaceful protests that you mentioned, do you think they will have a concrete impact on EU accession prospects?
I think that certainly the withdrawal of the law marked a victory for the Georgian people, but it is not the end of a one-off political crisis. And it's difficult to predict a future prospect. One is clear that the European Union is not granted candidate status on the basis of the European will and aspiration of the people, but on the basis of the concrete reforms implemented by the government. So that's why now government needs to recommit to the reform path in the following weeks and months to achieve Georgia's candidate status. And the priorities are very clear and are defined. So a clear change of direction is required from the government. At the same time, I have already mentioned that this law has raised questions about the commitment of the government. And the government has the chance now to address those questions and this skepticism and prove them wrong. So by decisively moving toward the implementation of the reforms.
Let's take a step back and talk about the August war in 2008 when Russia invaded Georgia. How has the situation developed since that moment in 2008?
Yes, so Georgia was aggressed, Russia aggressed Georgia in August 2008. Since Georgia was very vulnerable to threats stemming from Russia, the outcome of Russia's war against Ukraine will have direct and broad implications on Georgia, its security, and its independence. So, since its aggression in August 2008, Russia occupied two Abkhazia and Krim Valley regions of Georgia, that is 20% of the country. Russia is in breach of the ceasefire agreement. 10,000, before the war against Ukraine, 10,000 troops were deployed in both regions, and the occupation forces are stationed at 40 kilometers from Tbilisi, the capital of Georgia. So Russia vetoed the presence of international organizations, United Nations, the OSCE, blocked human rights mechanisms, and Russia continues denying the European Union monitoring missions, it's a civilian mission, the access to these regions under its effective control. So installation of barbed wires, detention of people, grave violation of human rights have been part of the illegal practice that Russia, as an occupying power, has been exercising in Georgia. However, one thing that I believe Russia has not achieved to shake, to alter, was the determination of the Georgian people to move towards a free, independent, democratic state. So the Constitution of Georgia tasked all constitutional bodies to take all measures to ensure Georgia's full integration in the European Union and in NATO.
So I'm wondering, fast forwarding from 2008 and to 2022, when Russia invaded Ukraine, how do the people in Georgia look at what is happening in Ukraine?
Um, uh, the Georgian population has full, absolute solidarity for the people, for the Ukrainian people, for the Ukrainian state that is fighting for their freedom and independence and for our freedom. And you can see the symbolic manifestation of this support and the solidarity at every step, on every occasion in Tbilisi and the entire country. Russia's war against Ukraine was not unexpected for Georgians. Georgia was the first country that was aggressed in 2008, and we were convinced that this was not a one-off event, but it was only the first step of the authoritarian Russia to regain, reimpose control over the neighboring countries in the region. Uh, and unfortunately, Russia has never paid any price for the aggression and for the violation of the fundamental principles of international law. So the problem is that Russia has never accepted the idea of free and independent countries in the region able to make free choices, and has never accepted the collapse of the Soviet Union. And Russia's neo-imperial instincts, nationalism, the opposition to the West, and everything that the West stands for only became more stronger and more pronounced. The Western response, or the lack of it, and this belief or this illusion that it would have been possible to contain Russia by economic engagement, strengthened Russia's sense of impunity and further encouraged the Kremlin's aggression.
Mhm. So, to conclude this conversation, Teona, I would like to ask you what do you think are the main lessons that we can draw from the protests in Georgia and everything that's going on in your country?
Um, I have shortly mentioned a bit what the Georgian population expect from the government. So Georgia has been given the unique chance, and it is unthinkable not to seize it. And what we expect from the government, and it is the government's responsibility to ensure Georgia achieves candidate status. At the same time, on top of it, government must stop alienating its partner countries, and partner organizations that have been investing throughout the years in Georgia's democracy and Georgia's European future. The recent developments carry two lessons for the European Union and its member states. So, first of all, when political decisions or political infighting threaten the state of democracy and the reform path in the country, international partners need to speak up at an early stage and make clear the repercussions that the lack of reforms would have on Georgia's partnership with them. Second, the European Union and its member states need to expand their support for non-state actors, to invest in youth, and to assist civil society and independent media to counter disinformation as well as hybrid threats to democracy. And finally, as for civil society, young people, activists, I think they have certainly demonstrated that they take ownership over Georgia's reform path and Georgia's European choice by holding the government accountable. Yet pressure needs to be sustained for the government to make the uh, concrete move and achieve Georgia's European candidate status.
Tona, I really have learned a lot from you about Georgia and what is happening. And I'm sure the same goes for our viewers. And maybe just also to remind ourselves, Georgia and what has happened in 2008 has come up often, also in the comments section of our the YouTube series with SCG director Alex Stub. A lot of people wondering, how this has also impacted what happened next. And I think thanks to your contribution, we have gained better insight today. So thanks a lot for joining us. And dear viewers, we see each other next week for a new episode. Thank you for joining.